My name is Leslek Czupryniak. I was asked to talk on this subject, which you can see here, adjusting dosage of insulin traveling across time zones, and we already traveled like 2 hours across the time zone, so I'd like to be brief. Also, what I'm going to talk about is basically an obsolete and out-of-date subject, because most of you are on pumps. Being on a pump, it's not really relevant. If you travel longer without meals, you simply continue with your basal rate. But I will briefly show you the sort of recommendations for those of you who are on multiple daily injections and, well, for your colleagues who are still not using pumps. In my country, I come from Poland. I'm the head of Diabetes and Internal Medicine Department at Warsaw Medical University. Almost 80% of our children and adolescents are on pumps. Pumps are reimbursed until the age of 26, which is quite a unique thing in Central and Eastern Europe. This was done thanks to a certain NGO effort started over 10 years ago. But in adult type 1 patients, they are still quite infrequent. They are not reimbursed and they are expensive. But just before I start this, I want to just say a few words about Kyle's presentation. He showed you his biking achievements and things like that. I can, if you're interested, or if you're living near Poland, I can share you some contacts with 2 professors of diabetology in my country who are exercise freaks actually. And we organized together as Diabetes Poland, our Diabetes Professional Association, this year in May, the first national championships in football, where we had 200 participants in 3 age group categories, all with type 1, 50% on pumps, 25% using flash glucose monitoring. Was quite an organizational achievement. And also one of those 2 professors, Professor Zozulińska from Poznań, Professor Klupa from Krakow, is organizing the groups which are going to the mountains, and their achievement is, the name of the action is 5,000 meters above glucose level, and their achievement was to go at the beginning of this year to Damavand, which is the highest mountain in Iran, not very far from Tehran, over 5,000 meters. 18 type 1 diabetes patients, which was the largest group ever conquering the mountain over 5,000. I guess in every country of yours, you can find people who are extremely enthusiastic about exercise. And I think the best attitude, or the best way to describe this attitude, came from one of my patients who told me he's in his late 30s. He started to have type 1 diabetes when he was like 22, 23. And he told me, I basically should thank God or fate for diabetes, because I would have never been so healthy. He runs marathons, he climbs mountains, he does all kinds of sports. If it wasn't for diabetes, when I want to prove myself that I'm healthy and others, I would probably be lying on a couch watching television and being severely overweight. So if you look at this condition that way, I'm not saying it's a blessing, but it might have its good sides to it. Okay, but just briefly about this issue. That's the map of time zones. We are somewhere here, at this point here. So if you came here from Mexico City, you can clearly see in this map that you're going into the future, yes? You arrive at a later hours, so the day becomes shorter. But if you're going back from Abu Dhabi, and let's say if you're from Miami, then if you're going west, then your day will become longer because you're going back in time. This is what basically happens. So whenever in Europe we board a plane and we fly to US, myself, it happens to me at least once a year, usually once a year when I go to American Diabetes Association scientific sessions. The flight to East Coast is about 8 hours, and the difference is 6 hours. So I board the plane and I get off the plane at the same time I boarded in Warsaw. So the day becomes longer. So if you're on a basal bolus regimen, you have to adjust. Boluses are basically easy, but you have to adjust your basal insulin. And I just give you one of the probably best examples. I know my patients are using it, which has been published a few years ago, how you may adjust this. The general risk for traveling is that, first of all, we want to avoid hypos. The patient should avoid hypos. That's the main thing. And if you look at any studies, 10% of patients taking insulin when they travel abroad, they do experience hypoglycemia. So traveling itself is a risk factor for a hypo. And those risk factors are multiple. It's first, there are changing dietary patterns. It's not that you travel somewhere and you eat something different and you might not know what you're really eating, so you cannot adjust your insulin dose to carb counts because you really don't know what you're served. And if you travel to exotic locations, you might be given I've been eating vegetables in various countries where I really didn't know. I didn't really know it was the meat or a vegetable. I was given something. So, and the taste was also difficult to say what it is. So you can adjust the insulin dose. Also, when you travel, there's a change in air pressure. This might affect the pump. So it's not the insulin dosage, but the changing in pressure. We had patients complaining that not but my colleague had a patient who fainted on a plane because somehow the pump started to push much more insulin because of change of the pressure in the cabin. It is slightly lower, although it is maintained at the proper level. It is slightly lower than on the ground. Other things when you travel is what happens with also if type 2 diabetes patients. I come from Poland, which is relatively in the north. So people go for a holiday to southern locations like Egypt, Turkey, when the temperature goes above 40 degrees quite often, and if they don't put their insulin to the fridge, it's dead. So they come after 2 weeks of all-inclusive holidays in Hurghada and they say, well, it was great, but my blood glucose was 300, 400, and I couldn't really figure it out. The insulin didn't work. So it was good they survived, but you also have to remember that it's a protein, and if it's exposed to high temperatures, it won't work. The general rule is that when you travel across fewer than 5 time zones, or for less than 3 days, you keep your watch at your home local time, and you follow the basal rate, basal time injected, the time of basal insulin injection at the same time, at your home hours time. You don't have to really adjust it. 4 or 5 time zones, when the difference is, well, for me, like here, if I don't have diabetes, but I probably will have one, type 2, everybody will have type 2, so I might have type 1 also at one moment, but if I traveled, it's only 3 hours difference between Warsaw and Abu Dhabi, so I wouldn't have to adjust anything. So if you also advising someone, you're the leader in your communities, you will be asked for advice from less experienced patients. We have to give some simple answers and simple regimens, not a complicated advice. If you ask a doctor, and that I've seen many times, even diabetologists who hasn't really thought it over, and if you ask them, okay, I'm going to travel, 24 hours in a car, big skiing holiday, for example, somewhere in France, from Poland, it would usually will take almost a day of driving, then what should I do? So the doctors often say, oh, measure your glucose often and just give frequent rapid insulin doses until it's okay. And it usually never works. It brings glucose to an erratic pattern, increases the risk of hypos, and someone who gives such an advice clearly has no idea what life with diabetes is like. So that's probably not a proper thing. Well, the best thing is to just maintain bolus insulin as you do usually and just adjust basal insulin. And then this is what I want to show you, just 2 prescriptions for traveling eastward and westward. And at the end I'll show you the paper where you can also find the reference for it, and it is all described in more details. So if you travel east, yes, your day becomes shorter. Yeah, am I right? Yeah, it's shorter. So you have to simply decrease the basal insulin dose. The question is how much it should be decreased. So this is a formula which looks complicated, but I'll show you on an example which it is not. So you set your watch at where you are, yes, when you're departing. You take your bolus insulin as needed, and then when you start, you take your basal, when the time comes and you're about to travel, for example, your basal insulin, and this will be the insulin which will be active during traveling. We can call it the travel dose. You multiply your normal basal dose through this. It's number of times of zone crossed divided by hours between basal insulin doses, usually it's 24, and you deduct it from 0.9. Looks complicated, but I'll show you it's simple. And then you get the number of units you give at the time you normally travel. And that's it. And then you set your watch to your arrival time zone. This is a tricky part. And then you give your regular basal dose according to this watch, to this new date, new hours. It still may happen when you travel, by the way, because you might still not arrive at your destination. Let's look at an example. If someone takes 20 units at 8 p.m., this is pretty early as for Polish patients, but 20 units is a frequent dose. If you take it, then you multiply 20, and you travel from New York to Honolulu. That's the 6-hour difference. It's 6 zones. So you divide 6 by 24, and you deduct it from 0.9, and you get 13 units. So you decrease your basal rate from 20 to 13, and that's it. You set your watch to your destination time, and then you take your 20 units when the time arrives according to this new destination time. So once you learn it, and someone is traveling often, I have patients who do it when they travel, like businessmen traveling at least once monthly to US, and another one, or even a few who travel to China. We do a lot of business with China. Couple of times in a month, they do it and it works. Because the whole thing is how to decrease the dose when your day shortens when you travel east. And when you travel west, it's the other way around. Your day gets longer, so you have to somehow dilute basal insulin. And the prescription here is different, simpler. You divide your dose by half, and you take half of a dose at your local destination, and then you take the half of your dose at your arrival time. You set your watch to arrival time, arrival zone, or destination zone time, and then you add the second half when the time arrives according to this new time. So again, if we look at the example here, it's 20 units. You take 10 units at home at your regular time. Then you said it's going back from New York to Honolulu. You set your watch to 2 a.m. because that's the time in Honolulu when you leave New York. And when 8 p.m. arrives, 2 p.m. And when 8 p.m. arrives, you take your second 10 units. That's it. So that's the safe way of extending the action of basal insulin. You do not add units to your basal insulin because then it would increase the hypoglycemia risk. So that's one of the prescriptions, not the only one and the best one, but I've checked it with my patients, it works. This is the paper where you can find it in Journal of Diabetes Metabolic Disorders, published a few years ago, and they used it in their patients, I used it in mine and my colleagues, and it all works. So this is it. Have you got any questions? If not, I have no idea what happens next. Oh yeah, there is a question here, sorry. I mean, I have no idea whether there is a break or anything. Yeah?
Okay, I use different ratios of insulin carb during the day. It's different in the morning, at midday, and at night. So here I have 10 hours of difference, and when it's in the morning there, it's midday here and that stuff. So how would you recommend to do in that case, like taking on account the distance between the basal time to the rapid insulin, or what do you recommend?
This does not really affect your your boluses. So if you calculate your boluses differently because you have different carb counts for different meals, that's it, that's okay. You just, when you eat, you take your insulin. You don't adjust it because you travel. You adjust it to what you eat, perhaps on a plane or whatever.
I use different ratios. I need more insulin. I use five
Okay.
grams, 1 unit in midday,
Yeah.
and in the other I use a higher ratio. So it's if I need more insulin in the morning and at night, and in midday I need less.
Yeah, but you're talking about
Which is-
bolus insulin.
Yeah.
Yeah, not basal. Yeah, that's okay. That's probably travel. That must be very personal prescription you're using. So I'm not sure if really travel might affect it substantially just when you eat. No, that's okay. The simplicity of this design is that when you eat, you take your bolus insulin. Yes, you take your rapid-acting analog, the way you would take it when you're not traveling, really. And of course, you might expect not a perfect glucose levels when you travel, but at least that is safe. And at least it doesn't give you hypo. You will get through with a bit of hyperglycemia when you travel. That's not really a problem once in a while. But if you faint on a plane, that's a disaster for everyone. Yes, they don't know what to do. They might try to resuscitate you and they will kill you during this. It's a horrible thing. There's one other thing which I experienced very recently. I was in India traveling somewhere in internal lines from one conference to another. And there was this lady sitting next, opposite, across the aisle, like maybe 25 years old, pregnant. Not diabetes, but pregnant. And she felt unwell. And they asked, okay, is there any doctor on the plane? And I reluctantly volunteered because, as you may imagine, it's no doctor's dream to save pregnant Indian lady on an Indian plane in a foreign country. But okay, I'm a doctor. And they didn't let me do anything with her because they asked me, okay, is there any proof that you're a doctor? Do you have anything? Can you show me any what? License, diploma. We have our little kind of a passport, which it's my license that I can work as a doctor in Poland. But it's in Polish. It has my photograph. It has all my degrees and specialization in it. But I use it in Poland when I apply for a job. I just give it, oh, this is my license. But I have no internationally acknowledged license. And the stewardess says, no, we have policy. You have to prove, if you're not, you cannot help her. And I tell her, dear lady, can you imagine anyone who's not a doctor who would volunteer to help a pregnant woman on a plane? And you clearly hear, I'm not an Indian, I'm some bloody European country, and I would have to be totally crazy. I mean, it's so dangerous. I reluctantly admit I'm a doctor, but she didn't allow me to do anything. So they searched the plane, and eventually they found some Indian doctor who apparently had some proof of being a doctor. So you might not even be helped, because even if there is a doctor on a plane, he might not be allowed you to help, let alone a nurse. A nurse could help, but I can't imagine a nurse is carrying her license with her. So this was weird. I only heard it in India. I think if any major airline would accept it, but you might have some experience.
When I was in the plane, a couple with 3 kids, 2 of them were sick. They were next to me, and we were talking because they talk in Spanish. So I was talking to them, and they know that I'm a doctor. And the people in the plane, they don't let me to assist them. There were 1, 2, 3, 5 doctors in the plane, and they were at holidays. They don't have their license. I don't have anything with me, and they don't allow us to attend the kids. One of them were 4 years. So that's crazy, but it happens. I have the same experience.
So we say in diabetes you're more of a doctor than anyone else, more of your own doctor. So on a plane you're really on your own, because even doctors will be stopped. But perhaps that is caused it must have been a story that some crazy people said, well, I'm a doctor and I will just deliver this baby on a plane, and then they later discovered he was a plumber, or some other not very medical profession, just had an excitement of helping at a labor on a plane, and they thought, no, that happens too often and we must ask for less. By the way, I'm not carrying any of my license with me, but our Chamber of Physicians declared that they just recently that they are ready to issue also in the English, so as we travel a lot, just to help. So just to make a point in importance in being aware what might happen when you travel. Okay, yeah.
Your recommendation depends on the kind of long insulin. If it long insulin NPH, or it's long insulin, ultra long insulin.
This is a universal formula because it doesn't really take into account, are you taking NPH? There are countries, like I believe in your country or in my country, even majority of people with type 2 diabetes, long-acting insulin is an NPH insulin, because you use for here, you use the hours between basal insulin doses. So if you take NPH, you put 12 here, not 24. If you take glargine twice a day, which sometimes happens, or detamir, which happens more often, you put 12 here. So that's okay.
And if it Tresiba, it's 80.
That's a good question. I have no. If Tresiba, perhaps you wouldn't have to do anything. If you fly it, you're free. Because this was published a few years ago when Tresiba was not available. The only country in Europe where Tresiba is freely available is reimbursed is Switzerland. In all other countries you have to pay fortune for it. I have it in Poland, but I have no patient on it. I don't think it's worth paying €150. The advantage is not that big if it comes to the price. But with Tresiba, the problem might disappear at all, because no one really stays on a plane for 2 days. Yes.
I used Tresiba.
Yeah? So it's 24 hours.
And I needed to lower the dose.
Lower the dose even.
The first day I was here, but now I'm
You're up.
high
Yeah.
the first day. So I need to go up on it.
Yeah, you might have become a little bit more resistant when you travel. It's also a little bit of stress, perhaps. Yeah, that's quite individual. But you're quite lucky. Tresiba's fine. Tresiba is absolutely the best long-acting insulin, but it's so expensive if it's not reimbursed. No, really, I wouldn't apply it unless you travel longer than 24 hours. But it's 10-hour difference. You're from Puerto Rico, so you're Costa Rica, so you travel 12 hours. But on a plane, how long are you on one flight? 15 hours. You're still covered. So. Okay, I can help you with a break or not. I don't really know. Dario has disappeared to some other duties. He's everywhere here. So, okay, one more question. Yeah, there's the.
I wonder if I did it correctly, because I'm on pump and then I came from Melbourne, so it's a 7-hour plus. So what I did when I arrived, I had different, so Melbourne to Singapore, Singapore to, so each country has different time zones. So in each time zone, what I did was I changed the time setting of my pump, because I get confused as to how many, units. And so, but I believe I was told before, long time ago, that I shouldn't change the time zone right away, but I forgot. I just want to verify.
No, it's okay. When you reach your destination, you should change your hours in your pump, because then you follow the pattern of the day here, and you're still under the basal rate. So you do it right. You do it's basically pumps make it easier. Okay. Thank you. I thought it was a boring subject, but apparently it wasn't. Thank you very much.